How's everybody doing this afternoon? As you guys are consumers, right? To me, a consumer is a user. I'm a user experience guy. I've always been a user experience guy. So ultimately, when we start talking about everything that we've covered to this point, I now have to humanize it. I have to understand how do I, as a technology building block provider, get silicon into the market that will enable all the experiences that we want our consumers to have. So I wear two hats, typically most of the time now. One is my Intel hat, where I'm a principal engineer, experimental psychologist, doing very interesting work that a lot of people don't think Intel actually does. And the second hat is at 3D at Home, taking my human factors expertise and carrying it over to a realm to drive the adoption of 3D into the home. So, historically speaking, my entire career has been spent in video. So if you look over the years, how the user experience has changed, we've gone from black and white to color, from analog to digital, and then from digital, standard def to high def, and now 3D. The adoption and pervasive of 3D in the market excels, I guess would be the best word, the movement from standard definition to high definition. And I was there for that entire 7 years where we looked at the human factors issues, trying to understand what was the best visual quality, what was the best standard to adopt in order to make consumers love HD TV. How many people here pay for HD in their home right now? Yeah. Do you like it? Yeah. You get used to it. Expectations change dramatically over time. Our children are going to have totally different expectations of what we thought and what we have, even moving forward, looking at 3D. So the media, we've seen a lot of media hype, you know, positives, negatives. I'm not going to read this slide. From my perspective, and I was at SMPTE, I gave a talk at SMPTE in Burbank. In the absence of real science, in the absence of real data, the gap's going to get filled by something. We don't know what. But we have the ability in groups like 3D at Home and research that Intel does in conjunction with Pacific University to drive this data. Okay? Here's a little story. I went to a 3D at Home membership meeting in Las Vegas. Typical meeting, you stand up, you give your update. This is what I've been doing, this is what we'd like to do, it's fantastic, blah, blah, blah. In these forums, typically people don't ask questions. So I'm about 3 minutes into my talk and there's a guy in the back of the room doing this. I'm like, oh great, right? I'm like, yeah, sure, do you have a question? He goes, no, I have a story. I went to my son's soccer game and my son was talking to one of his friends and they'd just seen a 3D movie. And his friend looked at his son and said, you know what? If we keep watching 3D movies, pretty soon we'll see the whole world in 3D. I really didn't have any response at that point, other than to take that story and walk away and say, is it reality or is it more than reality? And this is where the vision scientists, the vision community, the clinics, the researchers, everybody comes into this because first, we have a lack of education. We have people that don't understand what 3D is. They don't understand that reality is 3D as well. So Heidi's going to talk about 3D at Home and the consortium after me. And part of that is they developed a 3duniversity.net. Go there, get information. It's tailored towards the consumer. It's not just tailored to the scientific community or the industry at large. So once you start filling the technology void and the education gap, now we have a whole new concept. We heard from Michael Duenas that, what, almost negligible people have their children screened. I'm 40. I don't have regular screening. So I fall into that category of I don't have a problem, so why go? Right? We have an opportunity to take someone that has a potential problem, right, and fix it. This whole vision fitness program that we've been talking about, step one is getting people to have their eyes checked. Step two is finding creative ways using technology to fix, train, and help people see reality and possibly the entertainment industry, that's not the primary goal here, to see better. So, user experience, the name of my talk. Enabling a good user experience is a key to success, period. No matter you're selling a watch, a toothbrush, or a 3D television set, it's the user experience that's going to make or break your product. Now, in 3D, we've heard that the technology is coming along. Content is rapidly getting there. On YouTube today, there's, I don't know, thousands of homemade 3D movies, right? We're going to have cell phones out this year or next year that have stereo capability in it. So now, not only do we have an issue of providing people like Chris Haas with guidance around what will make or break a good 3D experience, we have every Joe on the street thinking they're going to be a cinematographer in 3D. So, humanizing technology is my tagline. It's what I do for a living. It's taking tangible aspects of the user experience and tying it to something that I can measure in technology. Whether it's fan noise, whether it's video quality, whether it's nausea, eye strain, fatigue, you name it, my motto is if you can see it, hear it, or touch it, I can measure it, and I can tell you how to build it better. All based on this thing called experimental and cognitive psychology. That's what my background is. So user experience is really the simple science of taking the time to measure things in a controlled and uncontrolled environments and figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and then how do you change it to make a user experience better. Dr. Sheedy presented some of the data and research that we've been doing together, and we've only been working together for less than a year. And the amount of data that we've collected, not only in the 3D world, but Intel builds a product called Classmate PC, in the vision world of understanding the differences between reading on paper and learning from computers. It's incredible. All of that can be essentially distilled down to manuals, whether it's meant for cinematographers, whether it's meant for parents, whether it's meant for educational material, or whether it's designed to be a program that gets implemented in schools, distributed to homes, so we can catch problems like learning disabilities early, inability to fuse images. It's all fixable. We just have to get a fitness program in place. So understanding the new user experience. Well, I think this is key. It's not 2D anymore. It's not HD anymore either, because the technologies that are providing you 3D are giving you half the resolution that you got when you paid for your HD set. It's not about the image quality itself. We can provide perfect left and right eye images. It's not just gated by the quality of the 3D anymore either. I use this funky little graphic here because I hadn't gone to Rick Dean and asked if I could use the THX logo. But the point is, if we're truly trying to create this immersive environment, right? And someone talked about the medical community today. I saw the Da Vinci machine, and it is the most amazing medical piece of equipment that I've ever seen. Flawless. And they train for hours and hours and hours on this thing. Why? Because they want to perfect their stereo vision, and they want to be able to use this thing everywhere. Non-invasive, three-dimensional, realistic surgery. It's pretty impressive, right? The medical field, the military field, they're way ahead of the consumer industry. And now we're trying to drive the adoption of this stuff into the home for entertainment value. So when you start looking at designing the proper audio systems, designing the proper visual systems, creating a 3D experience that is truly immersive, then you unlock the creativity that cinematographers have. You can create these different experiences of maybe you do want to have your consumer experience that sense of nausea, the stomach coming up into their throat. And for anybody here who watched Avatar in 3D, there's one scene that in 2D, it works. In 3D, your stomach comes right up, especially if you have height issues like I do. Totally amazing. Meant to be there. We don't want to eliminate those types of experiences for our consumers. We want to enable them. How many of you could say that in any given day, no matter what you're doing, you actually get into what I call an experience flow? I assume people here write papers or stuff like that, presentations, anything, yeah, no, yeah. It's called a flow. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to actually get in a flow, to stay in the flow. And it takes about a minute and a half to 2 minutes to break it. So once you get into a flow, you're truly immersed and enjoying whatever it is you're doing, whether it's productivity or whether it's pure entertainment. 3D needs to solve this experience flow. When you go to the theater, you're immersed. You're there, you're in it. Bang. Unless someone gets up in front of you, everything's fine. And that doesn't usually happen because if you're paying for the movie, you're going to watch the movie. Now you go home and you want to watch the NFL. Wow, now it's a totally different flow. One, because there's social aspects to it. Two, because of the way the glasses are designed today, if they are active, they'll shut off when the beam gets broken and therefore you get stuck and then it has to resynchronize. Right? You can't just lay down on your couch. So there's all of these things that need to be solved as we move along to drive the adoption of 3D into the home. Content, technology, environment. This is my biggest hot button these days. I was talking about it this morning. Scalability of experiences. You'll hear some people talk about the compute continuum. It's one of the things that Intel talks about a lot. Spanning experiences across devices. So currently we have wonderful feature presentations. People flock to the theaters to see 3D, and the movies are good. Well, how do we get that experience to be replicated in your home or on your handheld while you're driving to work or on the Macs? So this evolution is very, very complicated, right? You can talk about depth knobs. We had a discussion at lunch about the adjustability of depth for an individual user. You can talk about the field of vision. You can talk about viewing distance. But until you ultimately enable all of these experiences on the device in that context for that user, you're not going to have won them over. Now, think about it. Cell phones are coming out this year. How many of you actually go to an event and either take a video or a picture with your cell phone? Yeah. So you go watch your kid's soccer game and you want to videotape it in stereo and you want to bring it home. What are you going to do? Are you going to hand it to your spouse and say, here, take a look. It was a wonderful goal. No. You're going to want to walk in the house and either play it on your netbook, your notebook, or your television. Period. Right? You're not going to be passing around this little device. Those are the types of things that we need to solve. So, my 3D at home hat. I am a human factors engineer. I want to solve these problems. I want to drive research programs. I want to work in collaboration with the AOA and others to make sure we're addressing vision issues. Once we start to address the concerns that people have, the issues we might have around 3D, all of a sudden now we're moving forward. We're progressing not only society, like you were saying, we're progressing the whole evolution of the next generation of entertainment and education. So, 3D at home, Steering Team 5 is where I do most of my work. Currently, there's a lot of private funded institutional research that's being driven through 3D at home in collaboration with Pacific University. Hopefully the programs will get larger, and the adjunction to the AOA will give us that kick that we need from a visibility perspective, from a public health perspective, and most importantly, an education perspective. And that's all I have.